Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Alicia with Coaching with Dr. Alicia, and I want to welcome all of you all to our discussion today on Black men and mental health. This is part two of our discussion. And if you can recall, a couple of months ago, I spoke with Dr. Brittany Henry, and we had a really wonderful conversation about Black men and mental health. And the issue was that we had no Black men in the room to talk to us about what was happening with them. But it was still a wonderful conversation because we talked about, as Black women, how we can support Black men. And I put the link of that interview in the show notes. I also, let me see if I can put it in the chat. So you can take time to look at our very first discussion. I'm posting it here in the chat. When you get a chance, don't do it now, but wait till after we have this great discussion. Be sure to look at part one of our discussion because it was very valuable. We talked about stigma, we talked about shame, we talked about ways in which we can help to support Black men and all of the things that they're going through. But today is part two of our discussion. And before I introduce my wonderful guest panelist today, I just want to say hello to everybody. And I want to say I really appreciate you coming in here. Hello, Dr. Vibe. How are you feeling? Love Dr. Vibe in the chat. It's a wonderful to see you here. Hello to everybody. Bernard, Team Bernard, welcome everybody. And so I did share part one in the chat. I think what's happening is that Black families are suffering. We have a long way to go before we are able to heal our families. And the Black man is the center of the family, and this is so important to who we are as Black women. And it is really important in this process of healing the Black family. Hello, JC Stennis. Hello, Jessica Alexander. How are you? Thank you for joining us with this very critical topic, something that is very, very important to us. And joining me in our discussion today is Dr. Brittany Henry. I'm going to bring her up on the screen, but she's a fellow therapist who talked to me initially about how important it is and how important it is that we address Black men and their mental health. Let me bring her up in the camera to say hello.
Hi.
Hello there. Yes.
Alicia, how you doing?
How you doing? Well, the day is finally here.
Finally.
Finally.
We have men, and we have our men today. So
absolutely. We have our men today. And I love that we decided to do a part two.
yes.
I'm really, really excited for the conversation today. And I got I got questions for Black men. Please explain it to me.
Questions that need to be asked.
They do. And I'm not to say that these particular gentlemen that we have can speak for all men,
right,
but I just want to hear your voice. And I want to hear what you have to say because I got questions. I want to know what's going on. We need you all so much in our lives. And we can need to know what's happening, that things are breaking down in the family. Right. So joining us with our discussion today, first we have Quentin Mumphrey. Let me bring him up here. Quentin, hello. So we have Quentin.
Good evening.
Good evening. And Quentin is a pastor. So he's Pastor Quentin. He has been a pastor for 25 years. He started his own church 8 years ago. 8 years ago.
8 years, yeah.
He worked in the Chicago public school system, so he knows all about the Black family. Anybody who worked in Chicago public school system know all about what's going on with Black families. Definitely. He's an educational consultant. He works in special education. He's an adjunct at a university. He is doing any and everything to help save us as a family. Welcome, Pastor Quentin.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, wonderful. So we're going to have him weigh in on this very important conversation. Next up is another pastor. Today is Sunday, so it's apropos that we're going to bring in the spirit today in this conversation. Our next guest is a gentleman, Pastor Sean. He's an alumni of University of Chicago with me. So you know he's going to bring it today. His name is Sean Marshall. He's also a pastor at Salem Church in Chicago. He also has a consultant company, and he helps people navigate through change and transitions. And as a teaching pastor, so he's not the head pastor, but he's the teaching pastor. He works with mission strategy and any and everything to do with making sure that the church is running smoothly, but he has his own business on the side. These are ambitious men, entrepreneurs who really care about us. Welcome, Pastor Sean.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Yes. And to start the discussion, I want to go right into the source. I want to hear from you two as Black men, your voices. Please tell me, enlighten us, what do you see is the central challenge with Black men? What are you seeing with Black men around you? Like, what's going on with you, but what do you see as a theme for Black men? What is the challenge? And either one of you can start.
Sure. Marsha going to defer to me. All right. So I think with Black men, one of the things especially, and it's not only Black men, but especially Black men, is this challenge of suffering in silence. And I believe that stress is a silent epidemic for particularly Black men. That, Black men, we have this expectation many times that we just kind of constantly take it on the shoulders, right? Just we bear these burdens, you carry this weight, never let them see you sweat. These kind of things that we tell ourselves, we tell our little boys, don't cry, don't show any emotion, don't let them see you sweat, don't show any hurt. And as men, particularly in the context of families and communities in general, there's a burden, there's the stress. You deal with the stress in the workplace. Black women deal with it too, but in different ways, right? Mm-hmm. We deal with the stress of constantly assessing environment. So you go in a store, you're trying to make sure that you're not feeling threatening to people, or that people don't think you're trying to rob the place. And so you have ways of even positioning your body language, or you have a responsibility, even if you have an interaction with a police officer, make sure, okay, I'm not elevating my voice too much. I don't, so those kind of things. So it's this constant movement, it's this constant motion, a constant way in which you are thinking about not just your environment, but how you are coming off in the environment as a man. And then it is what you have to be to people. As a Black man, there's the burden of representation, which I'm sure Black women feel this too, right? You have this burden of representation that you want to make sure that when people see you, they see a positive image. And this is not just for white society, but it's for Black folk too, because you want younger Black folk to see a positive example of a Black man. So you're constantly carrying this burden and this weight of being a representative, being the embodiment of what a Black man is. And you're constantly being a lot of things to a lot of people. So I believe that for Black men, there is a weight of stress that can be a very silent, ultimately a silent killer. When you look demographically, Black men have the lowest life expectancy of any demographic group in the country. I think Asian women have the highest life expectancy of any demographic group in America. Black men have the lowest. We have the lowest life expectancy. I believe last time I checked was somewhere like 67 or 68 for Black men. And then I think for Asian women, something like 83 or 84. So when you look at our life expectancy rates, on average, when you factor the whole society, we're dying 10, 15 years earlier than everyone else. And there are reasons for that. Many Black men, I don't want to go too far in it, but a lot of times we don't go to the doctor. We don't get checked out. We don't monitor certain health indicators and things like that. And so you're carrying these things, but you don't have a way to offload what you're carrying. And that's why a lot of brothers engage in toxic behaviors and vices and other coping mechanisms.
Oh, that makes so sense to me. And I'm hearing you say Black men are carrying the burden on their shoulders, and there's not a single place where they can go in our society where they feel like they're really being seen for who and what they are. I can't even imagine carrying that around. Can you think about the fact if a Black man makes a mistake, it's almost like it's a catastrophe.
No, absolutely.
And to walk around feeling that you have to be everything to everybody, I don't even know, where do you fit in where you can just kind of like take all this off and rest yourself somewhere where you could just be you. It's almost like you have to be the perfect person and there is no room for you to make a mistake. That is definite. And you have no one to talk to about it. So you do suffer in silence.
Right.
Oh, goodness. So that is definitely a struggle. Pastor Sean, weigh in on this.
Yeah, absolutely. As I was thinking about this topic tonight, I was thinking about the movie Fences by August Wilson, right? And so you have that main character Troy, and he's such a complex character, and he's got all these bottled up feelings and emotions and struggles and failures and issues and trauma. And when you think about the man in general, but the Black man in particular in our society, we're not taught how to emote. We're not taught how to understand our emotions. We're sort of raised to think, as Pastor Q said, we're sort of raised to think, well, men, you're not a man if you're emotional.
Right.
So you got to stuff that stuff down. You got to fake it till you make it. So unprocessed emotions don't die, though. They go somewhere. So they rest in our body. They rest in our unconscious state. They express themselves in what we believe to be are the more manly emotions. So if a man is sad, it's going to present as anger. If a man is scared, it's going to present as anger. If a man is upset, it's going to present as anger. All those different feelings, we don't know how to process them. We don't know how to articulate them. We're not given an opportunity or a space to work through them. And then by the time they're coming out, they're perceived as, right? So that dominant cultural narrative, you're angry, so you must be violent. So now you're a threat. So now I cannot even vent out my feelings without you interpreting my feelings as a threat to you. So I can't be safe because me venting out my feelings threatens your safety. So,
when anger is the most acceptable form that society will accept anger. They won't accept emotions a lot of times, a range of emotions, but anger is what's accepted and what's sanctioned. But you're being misinterpreted because underneath that anger is all these other feelings happening.
Sure.
And you're not comfortable even talking about it. And frankly, we're not even comfortable with you even talking about it. So how can you be comfortable sharing that? That is a big problem.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, Dr. Brittany, would you like to weigh in on some of this? Because we got the voices we were lacking.
And as I'm listening to both Pastor Quentin and Pastor Sean speak and having to shrink themselves in spaces so that they are non-threatening. And what Pastor Sean is talking about, the anger, and it's this anger, the historical anger of Blackness, being Black, and for Black women, it's don't want to be the angry Black woman, but we're not seen as physically threatening. And we don't really know what that part of the experience is. We know what it is to not have too much attitude and to not seem too, forceful in conversation, but it's something very different when your physical presence has to be managed and adjusted so that you're not seen as a threat to everyone else around you. And it's scary. And it's sad that that's the experience of our Black men.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, everybody, we just heard from everyone on our panel here. This is part 2 of our discussion on Black men and mental health. Dr. Brittany and I, we did a discussion about a month or so ago. The link to that discussion is in the show notes, and I also put it in the chat. You can go and take a look at part 1. But a big thing, Dr. Brittany and I were talking, we're like, you know what, we got to get Black men on here so that we can hear their voices. And we got 2 pastors here to help us with this discussion. And, as I'm listening to all of this response to what's happening, what's the issue here, I'm kind of thinking in my head, there's this paradox going on where when you get these sort of traditional ideas of what manhood and masculinity is, okay, we get messages from society where you have to be strong, you can't ask for help. It is almost kind of supported that you suffer in silence. Okay, this sort of thing is what's supported in our society, but at the same time, you definitely need to have this space where you can ask for help. But to ask for help means that you have to be vulnerable.
Mhm.
And to be vulnerable means that, that means that you're going to have to let your guard down.
Right.
And you're going to have these conversations that in your mind you're thinking, I'm less than a man because I'm asking for help. But the reality is that when you ask for help because you're struggling with having the weight of the world on your shoulders and you're struggling from all this stress and the pressure, how do you ask for help yet and still maintain your manhood? Because we know as pastors and as therapists, we know asking for help really is a sign of strength. Any one of you all can take this question. How do we deal with this paradox of asking for help, but at the same time getting messages where when you do ask for help, it's a sign of weakness?
Yeah, I think we have to talk a lot more about shame, and I think we have to be able to name shame. We have to explain what that is. We have to normalize that as a human emotion. It's a human feeling, right? Shame is, guilt is I feel bad because of what I did. Shame is I feel bad because of who I am. I talk in movies, and so I'm also thinking of the Green Mile. So every time they electrocuted someone, right? They would say, "I'm sorry for what I've done." But then when they got to the big character, the guy, he said, "I'm sorry for what I am," and it just creates this moment, right? Because we all can relate to that. We all can relate to the experience and the feeling of not being secure in who we are. And if we don't find spaces where we can really process through what we feel, I think we cannot really arrive at a truth of who we are. We cannot fully understand our identity. So I think we have to give people permission to say, yeah, that feels hard, doesn't it? That's uncomfortable, isn't it? That makes you feel less than, doesn't it? We all feel that way. We all deal with that. Now let's give you some space where we can allow you to work through why you are feeling that way, and where we can find you some connection and some universality in that experience, because you're not the only one. You are not the only one who feels like you have the weight on your shoulders. You are not the only one who feels like you're dealing with trauma that you inherited. You're not the only one, right? Because part of what shame does to us is it makes us feel like, you're less than everybody else because you haven't figured this out. Why haven't you figured this out yet? You're 40 years old. You're a 40-year-old. You're a grown man. Why haven't you figured this out? You got kids. Why haven't you figured this out yet? You're a pastor. You're a leader. Why haven't you figured this out yet? And we need to give people permission to say, you're not the only one who hasn't figured it out yet.
Yeah, and I think like coming from a place of compassion
Yeah.
is really what it is. And what you were digging into when you were talking about shame as an emotion versus guilt as an emotion, it's like that shame, it just causes a lot of Black men in particular not to be able to admit when they're wrong. And that creates such a toxic environment. I do want to talk about relationships later on. I don't want to go into it right now because I'm a couples therapist. So I see what's happening in these families. And there's shame for Black men and women too, both of them. But, that is what keeps people from saying, what I did was wrong and I'm really sorry. I feel guilty about feeling guilty, connecting to that feeling. That's compassion.
Yes.
It may be uncomfortable for you,
Yes.
but we're still going to work through what is uncomfortable, because on the other side of that is, believe it or not, growth.
Yeah.
So we're getting real therapeutic and technical in here, but we'll let Pastor Quentin come in.
Well, I believe that shame is really critical when you talk about men, and there's a stigma, right, of feeling weak. I've done a lot of work in the education space, and when you think about growing up the South Side of Chicago, I think about even my dad and his generation. My dad, is from Southern Georgia, and married my mom here in Chicago and raised us here. So he lived through the Jim Crow South, fought in the Korean War, in one of the first desegregated units in the Army. And so that generation, for them, vulnerability was not an option, because if you appeared weak, there was always somebody waiting to exploit your weakness, right? And I think that message has inadvertently transmitted down through multiple generations of men. And I think about, you think I grew up on the south side of Chicago, not far from 79th Street, right? In the hood, vulnerability is you're a target. And nobody wants to be a target in the hood because it could be the difference between life and death. And so I believe that there's a way in which you learn how to put on battle armor at an early age, especially as Black men. For some, their battle armor is gang affiliation. For some, their battle armor is, getting put out of school all the time. So people know that they're the rebellious one, that they're hardcore, don't mess with them. And so there's different kinds of battle armor that we have. Vulnerability does not come easily to anyone, but if you have been given messages of not showing emotion, vulnerability may not be an option for you, right? And so, especially when you start dealing with interactions with women figures, and I know we're not on the relationship part yet, but Black people within a span of 60 years went from being the most married demographic group of people in America to the least married demographic group of people in America. And there's reasons for that. And there's a lot of kind of ripple effects of that, which we see, Moynihan's report in 1964 was unintentionally prophetic in the decline of the Black family. I don't want to get too much into that, but but I believe that there's a lot of things that go into where Black men are. Black men not asking for help and then now you have to deal with economic realities, right? We are in a situation where over the last 30 years, Black women have now outpaced Black men in both education and the income tables are starting to shift in many cases, right? And so these are even other factors where, went from a couple of generations ago that the Black man was the sole breadwinner and all these things, and what that means for male pride and dignity. And so now you have this thing of men, you're facing, racism, and then this worry and inability to be and then social media puts another pressure on you. And one of the things I told my church a couple of years ago, I said, the danger of social media is that it puts you in a constant state of comparison, and comparison is a thief of joy. Because you are I use this example, my brother Sean is he's a movie guy. So I always say you're comparing your whole movie to someone else's highlight reel. We've all had that experience of you go and you see a preview of a movie and you see that 30-second, that 1 minute, that 90-second clip, and you're like, that movie is going to be amazing. It's going to be hilarious. And you go and the clip you saw was the best part, and you're like, the rest of the movie was garbage. and so, but what it is that you saw the best clip, they put forth their best clip. The rest of the movie didn't line up with that. And so what I say to people often, you're down, you're discouraged because you're looking at the whole movie of your life. But you only see another person's highlight reel because that's what they put out there on social media. So you see the people that look like they're always on vacation. They're always on a beach somewhere, like they got a great life, but you don't know that they're depressed. You don't know that, that their life is not what they present. And you're comparing it with your life and your reality, and you're looking at your reality feeling badly about yourself. Comparison is the thief of joy, because now you are comparing your perception of their life with the reality that you experience of your own life. And I think that that's another thing, especially for Black men, is that we're looking at everyone else's success and what we think is their life, and we're feeling badly about our own.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and that ties so relevant to shame. If you walk around having these feelings of shame, so many times men put their effort into performance-based anxiety. Like, I only feel good when I have so much amount of money. I only feel good when I'm dating this particular type of lady. I only feel good outside when I'm winning, when I win something, when I do something. It's all of these things because you're countering this deficit in yourself. It's okay. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Really, it's enjoying yourself. That's really what it is. And we have an entire economy based on performance-based esteem, where we just put all of our place on these external things. Can you imagine if all of us just were to just have the best self-worth, not compare ourselves to other people and what they have, and not try to keep up with the Joneses? Our entire economy would collapse. if everybody were to do that, because we don't, I mean, even as women, we're not talking about women, but we feel like we got to get a BBL. We got to have, look a certain way and be a certain way and act a certain way, because we feel like we're lacking within ourselves of what, of course, women feel should be how women need to look. But men feel like they're just pigeonholed into money and success and fame. And if you don't have that, so many men feel like I'm not even worthy to be part of this family if I can't contribute economically. And when you brought out something about, women are outpacing men in terms of income, you talk to these women are like, listen, I still need these men, I still need a man. They're saying, listen, it's okay. I don't want this to be a deficit. Let's work together as a team. I'm finding a lot of women are saying this, and they're just pulling their hair out because a lot of men, not all, but a lot of men are they're not even pursuing these types of relationships because they're afraid. They feel ashamed of who and what they are because they think they haven't accomplished something. Dr. Brittany, weigh in on this.
Well, I mean, and I think one of the things that you were mentioning about I think all of y'all mentioned about comparison, but it leads to the overcompensation as a defense mechanism, as a protective factor to prove that you're competent, to prove that you're capable. And what it is people who are, self-loathing in this sense of worthlessness, they need validation and they need affirmation. And this is the way to go about it, because you're not going to be vulnerable and ask for these things because that exhibits weakness, but you're going to then lead with your accomplishments to say what you're able to do, what you're able to provide, all these other things, instead of who you actually are as a person. And I think so many times people don't know who they are because they've been so accustomed to just tallying up all the accomplishments to be good enough to present that to everybody else.
That is wonderful. So everybody, yet again, welcome everyone. Welcome Sheila. Welcome, of course, Dr. Vibe is here. Welcome Aaron St. Clair, James Keller. We got Gerald James. There's a lot of James in the chat. Okay. And Marshall. I love Marshall. Welcome everybody. The conversation is heating up in the chat. So wait, look at Shiloh. Shiloh has a comment. Let me see if I can bring it up on the screen. I'm going to be honest with you. Men with a diagnosed mental health past have to keep that part of their life private because of the world gladly accepts the alphabet community and ex-cons faster than us. Ooh, boy. Anybody want to comment on this one? Keeping a mental health diagnosis, it's almost like it's more acceptable for a Black man to be an ex-con, more acceptable for a Black man to be part of the alphabet community, LGBT plus, but they feel like if you have a mental health issue, that's the part that's stigmatized. Anybody want to comment on Shiloh? Shiloh Norman, thank you for that.
Well, I mean, that's certainly loaded. This is what I would say. I think that, Dr. Brittany was talking about performance. And I think that one of the things that we're oriented to is we sort of think, we've been conditioned to think that we can work for our worth. Mm-hmm. And what only works is when we work from our sense of worth, right? When we're not trying to do in order for our works to tell us who we be, And I think one of the reasons why it's easier for the world to accept and to affirm people, Black men, when you have a criminal record, well, I mean, that's an easy one, right? I mean, it's because that fits with the narrative. When we see you coming, you're mad, okay, you're a thug, you're a criminal, you're a crook. That makes sense to us. And I think when it comes to, the LGBTQ plus thing, I think because of the way we handle the conversation around shame, because of the way that we don't handle it, I don't think we give people opportunity to unpack their full reality in a way that they can actually figure out what this means, right? So So I'm feeling these things. I have these desires. I have these experiences. I was molested as a child, or I have these attractions, and I don't know, and they don't fit with the cultural narrative. So, in certain contexts, we immediately bash you, we immediately shame you, and then in other contexts, oh, just come on over here because we everything. I'm bisexual, I'm trisexual, I just try anything. So anything goes over here. So we go to these extremes
Yeah.
where we don't really deal with it over here, and we don't really deal with it over here either, because what we do is we give you some automatic senses of identity rather, and that lets you off the hook from having to unpack and do your work, sit in your trauma, sit in your feelings, sit in your experiences, and have to figure out who you really are. So on the one hand, it's too much for us to even deal with. We'll shame you out of even talking about it. And on the other hand, we'll give you some opportunities to just come on over here with us, and we'll just all feel good about anything and everything. And both are, pathways of escape. It's not until we can sit in pain. It's not until we can actually admit, I feel this.
Yes.
I've been through this. I carry this. And let the discomfort, let the shame,
Yes.
let it wash over you. And then unpack that in the context of your narrative and integrate that into your identity.
Yes.
That you can then say, this is who I am. And then I work from that.
Yes.
So I don't need my work and what you say about my work. I don't need my label and what you say about my label. I don't need these, constructs. This is all it is social constructs. It's all it is a construct. I don't need a construct to make me feel better about myself. It's from within. I've done my work and I've arrived. And so now I can live this out because it's in here. And it doesn't really matter what you say about it out there.
That's right. And you know what? I think what you said, you have just nailed it. You nailed it. This is what I do every day when I'm meeting with clients. I try to wipe away the defenses, wipe away all of the anxieties that people feel because they can't connect with all of the pain that they feel about what happened. And it's a challenge that we have to do as therapists, is to say, how did you feel? What did you feel toward this person for what they did to you? And they want to say, well, it's not that important. Oh, well, it's not that important. It's not that big of a deal. No, do not explain that away, because you're here talking to me and it's come up in our session. How did you really feel? And when you connect with that, that's when shame goes away, because you have to say, sit in this. Because when you get through this pain, you do have direction. Like, it helps you create boundaries around people to say, no, I'm not gonna have this today. This is something that doesn't work for me right now. Have boundaries and not feel ashamed about normal human feelings. It's like, just we as Black people, we were never allowed to feel anything in slavery.
Yes.
The trauma, the intergenerational trauma, the historical trauma, the freaking racism that we feel every single time we leave the door and I'm dealing with other people, and the racism that I feel as a Black woman when I'm interacting with other Black men. They're internalizing all of these negative stereotypes about me. And then I have to deal with that. I'm speaking as a Black woman sometimes. It's like, you see it on social media, and I know Pastor Quinn talked about this, is that you see it on social media, this terrible divide between Black men and Black women. And it just gets into, there's nothing wrong with me. It's that person. It's those people. I mean, just to think about the list that someone put out. Who knows who put this list out? The list someone put out about the Black women put out saying, don't
Oh,
let
the
a
first
man
date.
take you on a date at this place. Like, what the heck
Yeah.
is going on here? Like,
Yeah.
who came up with a list? Just be happy someone wants to spend time with you.
Right.
Like, that's the basis of a healthy relationship. And then men, instead of listening to this, will go and put out some other list. We don't know where it came from. A list of women. It's nothing but perpetuating the stereotype. Then it's not doing anything to help us move forward. But anyway, yes, Pastor Sean, you are spot on with that one. And people, it takes a lifetime before some people can realize what's going on. Pastor Quinn, Dr. Brittany, either one of you all can weigh in on this one.
I think going back to what I think it was Shiloh, correct? I think this speaks of the discrimination, like you were just saying, because Blackness is that space between, okay, this is dysfunction, but other cultures, it's bravery when they exhibit certain behaviors or certain things. You're speaking your truth. But for a Black man specifically to then come out about whatever mental health conditions, we use the C word, he's crazy. But if someone else, oh, they're so brave, they become vulnerable. And I'm like, well, what's the difference? It's his Blackness, unfortunately, and his maleness. And I think that's one of the things that just isolates and causes Black men to withdraw, because they're in hostile environments all of the time, because they cannot just be, they have to be better than, but they have to still be subservient in some ways, and they have to be, the provider, but then they can't have any concerns or questions. They can't have any fears. They're in such a paradox all of the time, and we expect them to be okay. And then when they tell us that they're okay, we know that they're not, but we don't really want to hear about them not being okay, because then what does that mean for us that they're really not okay? And it's this really terrible position that we place them in. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I feel so bad for what Shiloh was saying in that comment, that, you have to keep that to yourselves, because if you do come out and say you have different concerns or conditions or whatever, really and truly, how is your partner going to respond to you?
Yeah, I can't.
That's very real.
Yeah, I can't help but to think about the Twitch, the gentleman Twitch.
Mm-hmm.
I can't help but to think about that. You talk about someone suffering in silence.
Yeah.
This was not foul play. He did this to himself.
Yeah.
And you would not even think, that he would be even capable of such a thing based on what you're seeing. Beautiful family, beautiful wife, beautiful kids, beautiful life, all of these wonderful things happening. But he did not have a place where he felt like he could talk about whatever pain he was. Pastor Sean, we know people who are in those spaces who want to hurt themselves like that. They're in a tremendous amount of pain that they can't work through. And you can work through it. That's the thing. That's why we're here today, to have this very important conversation. Pastor Quinn, I know you want to say something.
So, I think it's also a different conversation when the pain is not obvious to other people.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is, you look at, I think, and I thought about that with DJ Twitch some months ago. On the surface, people would look at his life and think, well, why would you have pain? Right. They would look at his life. You have a beautiful family. Your kids seem to adore you. Your wife seems to adore you. Mm-hmm. You got status, social status. You have good work situation. You obviously make decent money. So the things that people on the surface look at as stressors and indicators of pain, right? My brother Sean, I talk about as a book, one of our mentors, Dr. Chandler, a book called Leadership Pain. Mm-hmm. And he talks about your pain threshold and the capacity to which you can handle pain. And I think that pain threshold is different for different people. Yeah. The problem is we are often trying to gauge and assess another person's pain threshold because we're looking at their life and assessing what we think of their pain points or their perceived pain points. So if you got a family that looks good on the surface, you got a nice house, you place to stay, you have a good job, this and this and that, you don't have obvious pain points. So we don't understand why you would be struggling. And so because we don't understand why you'd be struggling, that's even more difficult for you to say that you are struggling, because then there's the fear that someone's gonna be like, well, what's wrong with you? You're just complaining. You never satisfied. Like, and so this goes back to the shame issue, right? I have a shame because internally I feel like I should not be struggling.
Yes.
I should be happy with my situation. I should be happy with my life. So I have this pain that I'm trying to manage quietly and silently because I'm embarrassed to tell people that I'm in pain. And so I think this goes back to what Sean mentioned about identity. We do not separate our who from our do.
Yes.
Who
Yeah.
you are from what you notice even right now, right? You introduce yourself, you go to a dinner, an event, people, they let you know who they are by what they do.
Yep.
Right? Oh, I'm a this, I'm a that. And our calling card is our vocation. When if we're honest with ourselves, you are so much more than your vocation. And I believe that that's a reason that many people struggle. Me and Sean, we talk about this a lot because we talk about particularly there's a lot of pastors in the older generation that are retiring right now, many of whom we've looked at as mentors over the years. And I believe that one of the reasons that some won't retire is because their whole identity is wrapped up in that role.
Right.
And many of them don't know who they would be if I wasn't Pastor so and so, Bishop so and so, Apostle so and so, Reverend Doctor so and so. If I wasn't that, I don't know who I am. And we don't separate our who from our do. And if you're not happy with your do, it affects how you feel about your who. And so this whole thing about identity becomes all the more critical. And the other thing is this, when we talk about what if I want to do something different with my life? What if there are parts of my potential that I've not explored yet? But if I've built my whole identity and sense of value on being this person,
Yes.
how do I then pivot into something else that I might find fulfilling, but might be less prestigious in the eyes of society?
Right.
And so I think there's a lot of layers to this. And as men, again, this goes back to what I call the battle armor, that we have to keep up this. And then when you start talking about mental health, I have a saying, in the church, especially in the Black church, there's a stigma around mental health and counseling and therapy, largely and historically in the Black community in general, and in the Black church all the more, because we say stuff like pray it away. Somebody struggling, just go to the Lord. And I believe in that. I'm Pentecostal. I believe in all that stuff. The oil, lay hands, all that. Cast the devil out. I believe in all that. But I have a saying that sometimes you need an altar and a couch. That sometimes you need both prayer and therapy. That there's a way in which you need. Sometimes you have to talk it out. Some stuff needs to be cast out. Some stuff needs to be talked out. And I think that there's a way in which we have to make room for. I believe, honestly, one of the reasons, in addition to the stigma, one of the reasons we sometimes struggle with that idea of ongoing therapy and help is because it's not an instant fix.
Right.
See, we like to be able to fix stuff quick, the immediate thing, right? So the idea, if I pray about this, God might give me a quick miracle and I'm better right away. But what happens if you seek God for help about something and God's plan for you is a plan that involves a process of time and not a plan that involves an instant miracle or you're instantly better? I think we struggle with things like that because we don't want to wait for it. And I think it goes back to this whole stigma. Dr. Brittany mentioned, like this whole thing of the C word, you're crazy, in the Black community. It used to be, and I think it's changing some, but we have to continue to shift this narrative that if you get therapy, if you're in counseling or something like that, that does not mean you're crazy. It means that, because we don't apply that stigma to medical doctors, right? You would not say that something is wrong with somebody because they say, I'm going to the dentist. I have a toothache, I'm going to the dentist, right? I feel like my blood pressure is off. I've been having this dizzy spells, something is going on in my body. I'm gonna go to the doctor and get checked out. Everyone would say, do it. But if you're saying, I've been having these depressive episodes. My thinking is just off. I'm feeling very listless for no reason. I'm having this emotional roller coaster. I'm crying and don't know why. And they say, no, I'm going to get counseling. I'm going to therapy. What are you crazy or something? We don't apply the same logic to that we do to other areas. I think that's part of this goes back to this thing of identity.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, especially the part about this instant fix. You go to therapy, not for me. You go to therapy for yourself. And then they start, it has nothing to do with what I can do for you. I'm just drawing out of you the confidence for you to be who and what you are by dealing with the pain and coming out of that with this identity and making sure, because we all have multiple identities. And I like to make sure that each one of your identity has to be an extension of your true self. Like I identify as a mother, and you better believe I'm me. It's all me. I identify with being a therapist. I'm myself, I identify with being all of these different things, that these hats that I put on, where I'm identifying with all these different parts of myself, where I have to feel fulfilled, but it's creating this identity. Even being on YouTube right now, this is another part of my identity, and it has to be true to me. I can't be somebody else, and I have to be, and then I have to be okay with that. Even in the mistakes and in the places where I'm good or where I'm not so good, I'm still putting forth my best effort. So I love this, because I really do think that, and it's funny because before I meet with my clients, and I don't know how you all do, but I really do meditate. I say, you know what? I really would love for God to speak through me on what this person needs to hear right now so that they can be better. But ultimately, it's the client. It's you all making use of the therapy session. And for a lot of people, they get it and they don't have to be in therapy that long. But for other people, it's going to take them a little longer to do. It is a process,
Right.
For sure. But I got to get into my last question. And I'm telling you, as a therapist, and I do mainly deal with couples, I definitely want to go back on something Pastor Quentin said about it's a survival mechanism for a lot of Black men not to be able to show emotion. And it's good. You shouldn't show emotion when you're out in the world. Like, it's not a safe place for you to show emotions. However, when you come into your house and you're managing your household with your significant other and you're raising children, those things that helped you survive outside of the house, you cannot carry that into and expect to have a healthy relationship with the people in your house. And it's, Black women we got our own thing to deal with. So I don't want to say we're totally perfect, but Black men, come on, we're begging you to open up to us. We know you're not perfect, but open up, let us in. And we promise we're gonna love you through it. What you got? Pastor Sean, Pastor Quentin, I want the two of you to weigh in on this. What's happening in their households? We need you. This is for the Black family to survive. We need Black men who can connect with us on an emotional level where you feel vulnerable. We ain't gonna shame you. We promise we won't. So don't be looking for it. Don't project that on us. We're gonna love you through it. What do we need to do so that you feel like you can be what you need to be for us?
Yeah. I think I would say, in one of the lessons, my wife and I have been married 15 years, and to God be the glory. And one of the things that I've learned is the importance of not being reactive. It's being a non-anxious presence, right? Because when you are able to sit with something that you're hearing and not be quick to defend, or not be quick to, I have this thing. Sometimes I'll be talking to a younger couple in our church. There's one couple in particular. And do you all remember the TV show Ghost Rider? Come on, this is Ghost Rider. So you remember that? Yeah. I have a thing where, they're talking to me, and I'm talking to them about gaslighting, and what gaslighting is, when you're trying to avoid accountability, and I'll go, gaslighter, because that's you trying to avoid the feeling of shame that comes with recognizing that your partner is telling you something that you did was hurtful, something that you did was painful, right? And now you're trying to, instead of saying, I'm sorry, you're being reactive, and that's one of the defenses, right? So if you can simply be in a position where you can allow yourself to not be reactive, whether that's reactive in gaslighting, whether that's reactive in defending, reactive in avoiding, reactive in coming back with a critique or a criticism, where you don't ever, that's you talking about me, and why don't you, it's just being non-reactive long enough for somebody to express their truth. And I saw somebody comment, I think it was JC, said something about many express their feelings out through addiction.
Mm.
And I, I I heard a quote that said that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it is connection.
Yes.
And that's so poignant for me because I think what happens is when we cannot find safety in our relationships to connect around an emotion, we find that safety in self-medicating. We'll find it in, pornography. We'll find it in an adulterous relationship. We'll find it in other avenues where we then vent out what we're not able to connect about. And we find ourselves acting on these feelings. And so the breakdown in the relationship is when I'm acting on what I'm feeling that I'm not able to articulate, then you are reacting to what I'm feeling made you feel, and you can't articulate how you. So now we're reacting to one another. And Dallas Willard, the great theologian, he said that emotions make terrific servants, but terrible masters. So we end up being driven by all of these uncommunicated, unprocessed, unheard feelings. But if we could just learn to just say, all right, let me listen.
Oh my God. So are you saying Black men need to meditate and get into mindfulness? Is that what you're saying, Pastor Sean? That's what I'm hearing.
I'm saying that we all, I'm saying that we all need to figure out a way to not be driven by our feeling, to figure out how we can, the Bible says, be still.
Yes.
To just be still.
Yes.
To just sit and to recognize that I don't have to be triggered or reactive by what I'm feeling right now.
Yes.
I do not. When something happens and it makes me feel a way, I ain't got to do nothing.
Yep. You can sit with it.
I can sit with it. I can absorb it.
Yep.
I can take it in. I can say, give me a minute to process that. I can sit, I can hear you, and I can say, I hear you.
Yes.
Give me some time. Let me walk away.
Yes.
And can we pause? Can we pause this conversation? Can I go gather myself before I say something I'm going to regret, right? Whatever it takes to get there where you're non-reactive, that will cancel lots of separations and divorces and adulteries and addictions and all of it.
Because it doesn't escalate. That's a de-escalating phrase to say. It doesn't need to escalate with people throwing stuff. The police are called, you yelling at each other, going to your mama house, getting all mad, doing all sorts. It's sitting with those feelings. Dr. Brittany's laughing because you know that's what happens. I'm like, hey, what's going on here? Yeah.
Exactly. Just slow down and just bring it down. So, and I think what you were saying, Dr. Alicia.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dr.
What you were saying is so true because, so many times it's like, especially for men, when they're in the environment, it's not safe. It's not necessarily useful for them to be vulnerable with their expressions and their feelings in society. But when you're home, you don't have to be ready to attack or be expecting attack. And then when you have the suppression and the stuffing and the avoidance, at some point, it's going to lead to very explosive communication, and it's going to be very frustrated, a lot of irritation. And sometimes it's going to be the question that may have, been the trigger isn't really worthy of that kind of a reaction. And so we see these cycles in the communication, and you're like, wait a minute, that's all. It wasn't really, warranting that. And if we cannot get that figured out within the relationship, it's going to lead to barriers. And then you're not going to be able to establish true intimacy and closeness. So,
yeah. And the thing is that, you sever that relationship. And then if you don't fix what's going on, you end up going to another relationship and doing the same thing over and over again. And then because of all the shame, you don't want to admit your part in that. And there we go. We have an entire group of men who feel like, Black women in America ain't nothing. I gotta go be a passport brother. I gotta go somewhere else. And no, it's you. You're the problem. Deal with your own stuff. They start seeing these patterns, and the grass is not greener on the other side, is what's happening, because you still have to be in that relationship with yourself because you couldn't keep yourself from being reactive. Thank you, Pastor Sean. Okay, Pastor Quentin, weigh in on this. What's happening?
Yeah, I think one of the things that going back to just vulnerability and all these things, one is I think we have to be aware that inside every man, there's both Superman and Clark Kent. That there is a part of you as a man that wears the cape, that likes to try to save the day, and that likes to be this strong figure. But then there's also this part of you that's just Clark Kent. Clark Kent's a regular guy, was nothing extraordinary about him. I think that inside most men, if not all men, there's both Superman and Clark Kent. And I think that sometimes as men, we feel like people like Superman better than they like Clark Kent.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the dynamics that has to exist in relationships is to make sure that women understand that they need to love Clark Kent just like they love Superman. And I think that to the extent a man can feel like you're willing to accept both Clark Kent and Superman, it makes the process of vulnerability and openness a lot easier. And also recognizing that Superman has kryptonite too, that there's something that can even take Superman out. And I think that that helps vulnerability. And I think the other thing is how you handle small vulnerabilities with a man will impact their ability to open up with larger vulnerabilities. Right. So if you explode on the man because he forgot to take the trash can out, one day he had taken it out for 12 weeks straight prior to that, then that's going to impact how he decides to open up about a more serious.
Right.
Because in his mind, okay, she flew off the handle about a bag of garbage I forgot to move. I surely can't talk to her about the situation at my job.
Right.
You know what? I'm loving what you're saying, because what I'm hearing a lot of women say is that he didn't take the trash out like I thought he was going to be. Is he really going to be there for me when I really need him? And so there's this dynamic that's happening between us. And I think that we just need to give each other so much grace and compassion and understanding, and consciously put our heads into a positive space when we're thinking about who we're interested in dating. And I mean, since we're quoting Bible quotes, what you believe in your heart to be true, that's what it's going to be. If you really have an issue with men, or you really have an issue with women, what you believe that's going to be, that's what you're going to pay attention to. And that's what you're going to put the behavior of this person into this little box. Oh, they're doing this because Black men are this way. Oh, she's doing this because all Black women are this way. And you're playing out this narrative that it has nothing to do with anything. You're just believing in your heart to be true, and you're seeing this, and it's putting you in a place that is not helpful. It's not helpful. We got kids that we're raising who's watching this. You know, we can stop it in our generation. We could stop it if we were to just cut it out. Truce, time out. Let's just call it a truce. Let's reset. Let's hit the reset button. I wish that Black people, all of us, could just hit the reset button and just in our minds and in our hearts, just learn to love who we are, learn to love each other, and really exude that. And you'll be so surprised how your whole world will be changed just on that thought. Just really, you do create your reality. Anything that you're going through right now on the outside of yourself, it started from within. That's what the Bible says. And I got two pastors that are correct. They're nodding. So they're saying that I'm right. So there we go. So this is what we need to do. Okay, oh my God, it's been an hour. Let's wrap up this conversation. How about parting words let's start with Dr. Brittany. Parting words, Dr. Brittany, and then we'll go on to Pastor Quentin and Pastor Sean. parting words. What do you got to give in this conversation today?
I think it all boils down to just leading with understanding and creating safe spaces so that vulnerability can actually occur and that exchange can happen between Black men and Black women, and understanding that showing weaknesses is not really weak. It's just the vulnerabilities that we do all have, and they may look different from person to person, but they're there. And I think the accountability to grow and to do some self-reflection to see how you may be contributing either to someone's inability to be vulnerable with you, or that the cycle that can be toxic with the exchange in relationships and all that, and just making sure that you're being accountable to your part and your position that you play. And like you said, Dr. Alicia, giving grace at all costs when it comes to dealing, especially with our Black men.
Excellent. And of course, you can follow Dr. Brittany with Dr. Brittany Henry. That's real easy to get on Instagram. Follow her. Okay, and we'll go with you, Pastor Quentin. Last parting words.
First of all, thank you for facilitating and curating this conversation. It's so important and necessary. We need to talk more about Black men's mental health. I know we didn't get into a lot of things like suicide rates that have been rising precipitously among Black men, and I believe among Black youth is now the second or third leading cause of death, according to the CDC. But I think these conversations are important. And so I would say, for everyone who knows a Black man, encourage them to express their thoughts, their feelings, encourage them to be vocal about anything that may be troubling them, even if it feels trivial. And also, the scripture says in Hebrews that Jesus endured the cross, despising the shame, that shame is an enemy of healing, of wholeness. And you are more than your worst decision. You are more than your biggest mistake. God is married to your destiny and not your history. And you don't have to be defined by yesterday. You don't have to be defined by last year. I think one of the things that Black men need to understand, especially in this hour, is hope. That you need to understand that there is hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel, that there is hope. There is hope and there is help. And there are people who will be in your corner. There are people who will support you, who will encourage you, who will love you unconditionally, and not just because of what you can do for them, but because they want to see you win. So that's all I'll say.
Thank you, Pastor Quentin. And he is at the only Q.
The only Q Mumphrey.
Oh, look at that. Okay, the one and only. You should put the one and only, but I guess that's the one and only, the only Q Mumphrey. Thank you for that. Thank you so much. Okay, Pastor Sean.
Yeah, it's been truly an honor to be on this panel with you and with my friends to talk about this very important topic. I think the only thing I would add is, when my daughter was born 6 years ago, it put a new perspective for me on why I needed to do this work. I realized that I had a choice about whether or not I was going to hand my daughter down more pain or whether I was going to hand her down power. And I realized that I could only own my power when I was willing to process through my pain. And so becoming a father has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, but it's also matured me in 6 years more than it has in the other 38 years. Because what it's done for me is it's helped me to understand how critically important our families, our children, our communities, how they are impacted by the simple decision for us to be intentional about processing through our pain. When you make a decision and make a commitment to say, I'm going to sit in these feelings, I'm going to own my story, you literally change the world. So as a therapist, a counselor, whoever, however, please do it. Please.
Yeah, and we do this with our kids. We're like, how did you feel? What was that like? We're planting the seeds. So that's what you can do to break this cycle. It stops with us, right?
Yeah,
So anyway, I just want to thank all of my panelists. I want to thank everybody in the chat, everybody watching. I'm so happy that you guys have joined us in our discussion. This is part 2 about Black men and mental health. And I just want to thank Quentin Murphy and Pastor Quentin Murphy and Pastor Sean Marshall, bringing us in with part 2 in terms of our discussion. We've heard it from the mouth of Black men, and there's more to talk about. There's definitely more to talk about: suicide and all of these other hot topic issues. So I would love to have you back on. Maybe we got a part 3 going on: fatherhood, manhood, self-harm, and all of these behaviors. We've even touched a little bit about addiction. So those are some things that we can really talk about. But today we talked about shame, a lot about shame. I think Pastor Sean talked to us about meditating. He's talking about meditating and mindfulness. That's what it sounds like to me. We have to do this so we're not so reactive in our homes. We got to stay away from the stigma. And we know to be a man what it takes. And just being comfortable with who you are and connecting with your pain and all of these identities. I thank you all for coming here today. And thank you, everybody in the chat. Goodbye, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.